The existing view of Geumgangsan regards the origin of Geumgangsan as a kind of faith, and sees it as an extension of the idea of the Buddha land that originated in the Silla period. However, the recent re-illumination of Gaia research shows, contrary to the existing view, that Geumgangsan may actually be the Geumgangsan of the Avatamsaka Sutra. Until now, the theory that Geumgangsan is actually the Geumgangsan of the Avatamsaka Sutra has been steadily raised. Even if one regards only the records mentioned already from the Three Kingdoms period as factual, there are many records. The existing theories that support Bingguang Haiyan's theory that Geumgangsan is actually the Geumgangsan of the Avatamsaka Sutra are broadly the C theory of the Mahayana figure, Nagarjuna Bodhisattva, and the theory of the maritime propagation of Buddhism, of Professor Louis Lancaster of Harvard University, a renowned authority in world Buddhist studies today. Kang Sang-won argues that in the Oxford Dictionary written by the Sanskrit master William James, Sakyamuni is said to have been of the Dangan people. First, if we examine the C theory of the Mahayana figure Nagarjuna Bodhisattva, it provides an important clue connected with the Bodhisattva rank of the Dammugal Bodhisattva. As is well known, Bodhisattva is a representative term of Mahayana Buddhism, and Nagarjuna Bodhisattva is the representative of Mahayana Buddhism. To begin, Mahayana Buddhism presents diverse views on the identity of Buddhism. First of all, in Mahayana Buddhism the scriptures themselves are regarded, so to speak, less as the direct preaching of the Tathagata Sakyamuni spoken of in Hinayana Buddhism, than as a Buddhist way of thinking. The scriptures of Mahayana Buddhism represented by the Heart Sutra, the Avatamsaka Sutra, the Lotus Sutra, the Diamond Sutra, the Chinsugying, and the like never appeared at all in Hinayana Buddhism. Therefore, Amitabha Buddha, Avalokitesvara, and the Buddhas of the past, which newly appeared in Mahayana Buddhism, are of unclear substance in Hinayana Buddhism. It is said that the gods of Hinduism were accepted in Mahayana Buddhism. Nagarjuna Bodhisattva, the source of the Heart Sutra, the Avatamsaka Sutra, the Lotus Sutra, the Diamond Sutra, and the Chinsugying, even said that he had gone to the Dragon Palace of the Sea and brought back these Mahayana scriptures, and the Mahayana Buddhist community all officially acknowledge this. As is well known, Southern Buddhism, which is Hinayana, and Northern Buddhism, which is Mahayana, even differ in their very Buddhist eras. That Nagarjuna Bodhisattva's Sea and Dragon Palace were officially acknowledged by the Mahayana Buddhist community shows that at that time Sea and Dragon Palace were used in a sense different from today's. As a term like Shindok shows, Sea and Dragon Palace are said to have been used at that time to refer to the land of the gentlemen east of China, where Geumgangsan is located today. The Sea theorists such as Park Yongsik say that Changguan, in the end, rendered the Sea of the Avatamsaka Sutra, in the terminology of that time, and interpreted it in like today's Sea as the eastern country, thereby interpreting Geumgangsan as a mountain of the eastern country. In the end, this shows that already in the time of Mahayana Buddhism saw Mount Sumeru not in India but in the east, where Geumgangsan is located, and officially acknowledged that Buddhism came from the east. The points that the Dammugal Bodhisattva is a bodhisattva, and that Geumgangsan belongs to the Avatamsaka Sutra, a Mahayana scripture, become evidence that the Avatamsaka Sutra itself was already written regarding Geumgangsan as the actual Geumgangsan of Korea. Therefore the Sea theorists argue that the Yuan aristocrats recognized Geumgangsan as the Geumgangsan of the Avatamsaka Sutra. Next, if we examine the theory of the maritime propagation of Buddhism, of Professor Louis Lancaster of Harvard University, a renowned authority in world Buddhist studies today, the theory of the maritime propagation of Buddhism also demonstrates actual cases for the theory of the Sea theorists. Louis Lancaster, director of the project to digitize the world's Buddhist materials, regards the feminization of Buddhist bodhisattvas such as Avalokitesvara as evidence of maritime propagation. Since religion has an affinity with commerce, just as Buddhism was propagated by way of the Silk Road, Buddhism is said to have been propagated by way of maritime trade routes, and because this was more powerful than overland routes, the Buddhist images came to display the femininity that is characteristic of maritime culture. Ha Huango K2 is connected with the twin fish motif related to maritime culture. And in fact, India and Giam Gangsan were, like Empress Ha, highly likely to have been connected by sea routes. On the other hand, traditionally sea was, unlike with Louis Lancaster, also regarded as a desert. India and Giam Gangsan are separated by desert, and the world beyond the desert became, in effect, the dragon palace of the land of the gentleman. There are two difficulties in accepting the existing theory, and recent theories are resolving these difficulties, thereby lending strength to the theory that the Giam Gangsan of the Avatamsaka Sutra is actually today's Giam Gangsan. Of the two difficulties, the first is whether, if Buddhism arose at Giam Gangsan, there are other similar cases and by what principle, and the second is whether there is historical evidence by which Giam Gangsan can be interpreted as a center called the land of the gentleman. As for the first, the discussion of the principle by which Buddhism could arise at Giam Gangsan has appeared in recent discussions related to Gaya, and the second, the documentary evidence, has recently emerged from China's Northwest Project. First, if we examine the first, principal aspect, the tidal flats and rivers of Gaya, and the sun, are said to be the principle of the origin of Buddhism. Among the artifacts recently discovered in Gaya, the ones that draw the most attention are the cauldron and the steamer. The cauldron and steamer also appear at temples related to Maitreya Buddha, represented by Jinpyang, namely Giam Sansa, the Opusa, and Bryansa, and the reason the cauldron and steamer draw attention is that the principle of the circulation of water and sun that appears in the cauldron and steamer can become a basis for Buddhism. Whereas the Buddhist principle of transmigration was skewed toward the single lifetime of a human being, ancient, former Buddhism applied transmigration not only to human beings but to all things. The particular attention paid to Gaya in connection with Buddhism on the Korean peninsula is because Gaya was not only the most advanced civilized state of that time, but is also connected with the Gaya of India. The very character bull is said to signify measuring and awakening oneself with bow and arrow toward the sun. In the representative dragon and phoenix culture of Northeast Asia, if the sun and moon as the sun deity symbolize the phoenix, then Venus, which conveys the power of the sun, becomes the principle of the 5 phases. In antiquity, the serpent signifies the changes of the sun, and fire signifies the circulation of the sun's energy. The light, heat, and humidity that the sun possesses are, respectively. Next, if we examine the documentary aspect, it is that in China's Northwest Project cases in which Dangan is identified with the Yellow Emperor, occur frequently. The Yellow Emperor's being identified with Dangan is that, like Dangan, the Yellow Emperor remained as an immortal. The Yellow Emperor lived more than 400 years, and this is also said to mean that some 400 years later, in the time of Emperor Yao, who was close to being his own great-great-grandson, the Yellow Emperor founded the land of the gentleman in the east, as Dangan. Although the debate over the origins of Korean Sundu and Taoism had found no clue toward resolution, an unexpected clue comes to be unraveled through China's Northwest Project. If the Yellow Emperor and Dangan are connected with each other, then the origin of Buddhism is connected with the sun deity, providing a great clue toward resolving the difficult problems of understanding and propagating Buddhism. In the end, the Dammugal Bodhisattva, as a discussion of the Buddhism before Buddhism, becomes an occasion to examine Hoamsa.